Have you ever stood in your garden, looking at a plant that just seems a little sad? I have, more times than I can count. You give it water, you give it sunshine, but it's still missing that special something. It's a feeling a lot of us know, whether we're tending to a whole backyard full of veggies or just a single pot on the windowsill. We all want to see our little green friends thrive. So what if I told you there might be a secret, a little bit of old-fashioned wisdom, hiding right in your kitchen trash can? It sounds a little wild, I know, but I found myself wondering what would happen if I took all those leftover bits and pieces from our family meals and buried them right under my tomato plants. Would it be a complete disaster? Or would it be the magic ingredient I'd been searching for all along? This whole idea felt like a little adventure waiting to happen right in my own backyard. It wasn't about finding some complicated fertilizer or following a strict set of rules from a book. It was about getting back to basics, about using what we already have to nurture something new. I imagined those banana peels, eggshells, coffee grounds slowly breaking down in the soil, creating a rich secret feast for my tomato roots. It was a beautiful thought, but I had so many questions. Would it smell terrible? Would our dog, or worse, some wild critter decide to dig it all up? And most importantly, would it actually make a difference for my tomatoes? I decided there was only one way to find out. The garden has always been my quiet place, a spot where I can get my hands dirty and watch things grow. It's where I connect with the seasons and teach my kids about where our food comes from. This experiment felt like a natural extension of that. It was a chance to try something simple and a little unconventional. There's a certain kind of joy that comes from experimenting, from not knowing exactly how things will turn out. You just have to trust the process, trust the soil, and be ready for a few surprises along the way. So, with a bucket of kitchen scraps and a heart full of hope, I decided to give this little garden secret a try. My love for gardening didn't start with a perfect plan or a deep knowledge of soil science. It started simply with a desire to create something beautiful and real for my family. I'm no master gardener, just someone who finds peace in the rhythm of planting and tending. Over the years, I've learned that the garden is a great teacher of patience and resilience. Some years, the zucchini takes over everything in sight. Other years, the peppers barely show up. And my tomatoes? I dream of those big, juicy, sun-ripened tomatoes, but mine often turned out just okay. They were good, but they never had that incredible flavor I was hoping for. I'd heard whispers of this old-timey trick from other gardeners, read about it in old farm almanacs. The idea is a form of composting much simpler. Instead of a big, complicated compost bin, you just dig a hole, let the earth do the work. It's called trench composting, dig and drop. The theory is, as the kitchen scraps decompose, they release valuable nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, directly into the soil where roots can find them. It's like a little all-you-can-eat buffet underground for your plants. It made so much sense to me. It felt resourceful and connected, a way to close the loop between our kitchen and our garden. The first step was to start collecting our scraps. I placed a small covered bucket under the kitchen sink. I told everyone in the family what it was for. This became a fun little mission for all of us. Instead of scraping plates into the trash, we started looking at our leftovers with new eyes. Eggshells were rinsed and crushed. Leftover coffee grounds were scooped out of the filter. Banana peels were saved. We collected wilted lettuce leaves, the tops of strawberries, apple cores, vegetable peelings from carrots and potatoes. It was amazing to see how quickly our little bucket filled up. It made me realize just how much we were throwing away every single day. We made a rule to only include plant-based scraps. This is a really important tip for anyone who wants to try this. We avoided meat, dairy, oils, greasy foods. Why? Because those things can cause some real problems. They can create awful odors as they break down. They are much more likely to attract unwanted visitors to your garden, like raccoons or even your own family dog. We stuck to the simple stuff: fruits, veggies, and coffee grounds. The kids loved being a part of it, crushing the eggshells with their hands, proudly adding a banana peel to the bucket. It turned a daily chore into a treasure hunt. Over the course of about a week, we had a full bucket ready to go. Now for the part where I actually got my hands dirty. I chose a nice sunny spot in the garden for my special tomato plant. Before I even thought about putting the plant in the ground, I focused on preparing its future home. I took my shovel and dug a hole much bigger and deeper than usual. I aimed for about 1.5 feet deep and maybe a foot wide. It felt like I was digging for buried treasure. The goal was to create a little reservoir of nutrients deep down. Once the hole was dug, it was time to add our collection of kitchen scraps. I poured the entire bucket into the bottom of the hole, chopped up peels, ground shells right into the bottom of the hole. It made a colorful layer at the base. Then, I took my shovel and mixed the scraps in with some of the soil I had just dug out. I wanted to make sure they were well incorporated and not just sitting in a dense clump. This helps them break down more evenly and prevents any potential pockets of rot. It's like mixing the ingredients for a cake. You want everything to be evenly distributed to get the best result. After the scrap layer was mixed in at the bottom, I added a thick layer of plain garden soil on top of it, about 6 to 8 inches deep. This step is crucial. You want to create a buffer between the decomposing scraps and the delicate roots of your new tomato plant. If the roots touch the fresh scraps directly, the intense decomposition process could actually burn them, which means to damage them. This soil buffer gives the scraps time to start breaking down gently while the young plant gets established. It's like putting a protective blanket between the powerful nutrients and the baby roots. The first couple of weeks were a test of my patience. I watched that little tomato plant like a hawk, checking on it every single morning with my cup of coffee. I half expected to see some dramatic overnight change, but nature doesn't really work that way. For the first week or so, my scrap-fed plant looked almost identical to my control plant. They were both about the same height, had the same number of leaves, and seemed equally happy in their sunny spots. I started to wonder if I had gone to all that trouble for nothing. I kept checking the soil, half expecting a bad smell to start rising from the ground, but there was nothing, just the clean, earthy scent of a healthy garden. Around week 3, I started to notice a subtle difference. The leaves on the scrap-fed tomato plant seemed to be a slightly deeper shade of green. It wasn't a huge, glaring difference, but it was there. The plant just looked a little more vibrant, a little more robust. It was like seeing a friend who just got back from a relaxing vacation. They just have a certain glow about them. My control plant looked perfectly fine, healthy even, but my experimental plant was starting to have a little extra sparkle. This was the first sign that something different was happening beneath the surface. My little underground buffet might actually be working. By week 5, the difference was undeniable. The scrap-fed plant had officially overtaken the control plant in height. It was visibly taller, bushier, with thicker stems and more sprawling branches. It was growing with a kind of enthusiasm that I had never seen in my tomatoes before. I had to add a taller stake to support it because it was growing so quickly. One of the biggest questions I had going into this was about animals. I have a very curious dog, squirrels, raccoons, always on the lookout for a free meal. I was genuinely concerned burying a pile of food scraps would be like sending out a dinner invitation to every critter in a 5-mile radius. I pictured my garden being dug up, my hard work completely undone. But to my complete surprise, nothing happened. Not a single disturbance. I believe the key was burying the scraps so deeply and covering them with that thick layer of soil. The scent was contained, the treasure remained hidden from curious noses. Another surprise was the lack of any bad smell. When you think about a pile of rotting food, you naturally think of a foul odor. I was prepared for the area around my tomato plant to smell like a compost bin, but it never did. The soil did its job perfectly, acting as a natural filter. The decomposition was happening deep underground. Microorganisms in the earth broke everything down efficiently and cleanly. The only scent was rich, healthy soil, one of the best smells to a gardener. The most delightful surprise came from the plant itself. One morning, I noticed something odd at the base of my scrap-fed tomato plant. A tiny green seedling was poking its head out of the soil. At first, I thought it was a weed, but as it grew, I realized it was another tomato plant, a volunteer. One of the tomato seeds from a scrap I had buried must have survived and sprouted. It felt like a little gift from the garden. When it was finally time to harvest, the results were as clear as day. The difference between my two plants wasn't just in their size, it was in the fruit they produced. My control plant, the one I cared for in my usual way, gave me a respectable amount of tomatoes. They were nice, salads, sauces. It was a perfectly average yield, but my scrap-fed plant, it was a superstar. The sheer number of tomatoes it produced was astounding. For every one tomato I picked from the control plant, it felt like I was picking 3 or 4 from the experimental one. The branches were heavy with clusters of bright red fruit. The size of the tomatoes was also noticeably different, larger, more uniform in shape. They were plump and heavy in my hand, the kind of picture-perfect tomatoes you see at a farmer's market. I had fewer issues with blossom end rot, which is that ugly black spot that can form on the bottom of tomatoes when the plant has a calcium deficiency. Since I had buried plenty of crushed eggshells, which are rich in calcium, it seems my underground pantry provided the plant with exactly what it needed to form perfect, healthy fruits. But the most important test, of course, was the taste test. This was the moment I had been waiting for all season. I sliced up a tomato from each plant and put them on a plate, side by side. The tomato from the control plant tasted good, but the tomato from the scrap-fed plant was on another level. It was incredible. If this story has you feeling inspired to try burying scraps in your own garden, I say go for it. It's such a rewarding and low-cost way to give your plants a boost. My first and most important tip is to choose your scraps wisely. Stick to plant-based materials only. Fruit peels, vegetable peels, cores, coffee grounds, tea bags, crushed eggshells, absolutely no meat. Bones, dairy products, oily foods. These will cause bad odors and attract pests, which is the last thing you want in your beautiful garden. Keeping it clean and simple is the key to success. My second piece of advice is to dig deep. Don't be afraid to put in a little extra work up front. Dig a hole that's at least a foot deep. Place your scraps at the very bottom. Then cover them with a good 6 to 8 inches of plain soil before you put your plant in. That soil buffer protects the young roots from the intense decomposition process, and it keeps any smells or pests away. Be patient. This isn't an instant fix. You won't see a dramatic difference overnight. The magic is happening slowly, deep under the soil. The scraps need time to break down and release their nutrients. You'll likely notice real benefits after 3 to 4 weeks, as roots grow down to that nutrient-rich layer. Just keep watering your plant as you normally would and trust the process.